Exactly. Yeah, we have to have a purpose or we don't get out of bed in the morning. Exactly.
So if you wanted to talk about Gus, you're good to go.
I'll make up something about it.
Okay, we're going to kind of go to another part of the country. We were in Nebraska. Now we're going to go to Louisiana. Well, there it is. We have with us this afternoon Anna Stokes. She's from Sulphur, Louisiana. She's co-owner of Duhon Cattle. She's 5th generation. And in South Louisiana, I kind of know what you're grazing there. She ranches with her dad, and with that, I will let her tell you more of her story. I'm not going to take away from her presentation. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you. So I'll tell you my story and my passion and why I do what we do. So like she said, I'm 5th generation in Louisiana. I'm a member of the Louisiana GLCI. And this is my dad and my husband. And the three of us, we run about 150 mama cows on 1,000 acres in right down there about where that story is. So where we're at was probably the corner of what used to be 2.5 million acres of prairie grass, just like the sandhills of Nebraska. But farming came in, they started planting rice, beans, and all those things, and that prairie grass slowly went away. So where we're at, when my grandfather was 12 years old, he rode across what was then just prairie grass. And he told my dad that he could put his hands out on the back of a horse and touch the top of the prairie grass. That is no longer there. That is all gone. A lot of it has to do with encroachment of salt water. So this is our 1,000 acres. This right here is the Intracoastal Canal, built for World War I, I believe it was. Could be II. One of those wars. That was built so the U-boats could come out of the Gulf and not be bombed in the Gulf. So they came, that's about 15 miles from the Gulf of Mexico. And it runs from Corpus Christi to Florida and from Florida to New York, I believe. And so it was an inland outlet, and that's where the boats came. So that's where we ranch at, on that Intercoastal Canal. So we are very susceptible to Mother Nature. Even though we have native pasture and we have what is called marsh, which is really good grazing, and you have to have cattle that know how to go in those places. And there's a lot of cattle in our part of the country that know how to do this. So this is some of our cattle grazing on the Intercoastal. That's the Intercoastal Canal in the background. And we're on the north side of the Intercoastal. That tree line is on the south side of the Intercoastal, and that's the spoil. That's where they piled the dirt when they dug it. It was on the south, and they changed different. They're on the north on some parts and on the south on others. So that's a tugboat with our cattle in. So being where we are extremely susceptible to hurricanes, low pressure systems, water that they release from a dam that's 2 hours and 30 minutes from us because of that intercoastal canal. So this was Hurricane Ike. This was our pasture when we got back. Our cattle were on one little high spot. We swam them out through that black gate right there. And that was the entire 1,000 acres. That's what it looked like. So this was what was left after Hurricane Laura. That's the cow camp. And when we came back, that's what the cow camp looked like, along with our cow pens were totally gone. Every tree in the cow pens, we had huge mature trees. That was our shade. We no longer have any shade. We had to completely rebuild our cow pens. I just didn't have a good picture of it, so I didn't load it. So those are some of the challenges we have. This is fresh water release from the dam. This was after Harvey, and it didn't rain at our place, not one drop. But that's how much water they released from the dam, and it came down the Sabine River in the intercoastal canal and flooded 640 acres. So all those things are the challenges that we do. We also have snow like we had last year, and this was in February, and it got pretty rank for about 5 days. We don't feed hay, so luckily I had about 300 square bales in the barn for some horses, and the cattle got fed hay every other day and cubes the other. I did hay one day, cubes one day, and that was only the cows that had not calved yet or the open cows. The pairs were already on winter forage, and they just had to hump it. So it got pretty cold, so cold that even the crawfish bundled up. But we're not used to that, and so it was pretty challenging. So I'm telling you all about the challenges because if we weren't doing what we call the grazing like we do, we would not have made it through all those challenges. And some of the things that we do is we do a lot of prescribed burning. We burn in the spring. We burn in the what I call spring is February. That's probably not what some of y'all call spring, but for us, spring is February. We burn the marshes in the spring. In the fall, I burn pasture to get ready for my winter forage. Now, this was this year. For me to be able to plant ryegrass, which yes, we plant ryegrass, because we don't feed hay, we stockpile and we plant ryegrass. So I literally I had so much forage and I had cattle on it, and I did my best to try to get them, they just couldn't get it all. So I did have to do a little burn down, which we have to do sometimes, and I set it afire. This is what it looked like, and this is what it looked like before I left home. So it's almost ready to start, but they don't get on this till they start having babies, and then each pair is put on there as babies start hitting the ground, and that's last year's babies. But so we also do cover crop. We try to plant turnips or deep-rooted radish, which that's what my dad has in his hand there, and it works good if it has some dirt to get to. If I try to plant the turnips without a little bit of dirt, they just don't do well. They don't take, and so sometimes we've drilled, we've disked to plant winter forage, we've burnt to plant winter forage. It all depends on what happens during the year and where we're at that point, how we're going to plant our winter forage. So and I have to have it because I don't feed any hay, and which brings us to what we mostly do, and that's stockpile pasture. So I'm fortunate enough that I'm able to hold off, it's about 400 acres. And from June to November, there's no cattle on it. And we just let it just grows. And this is a lot of native pasture. This is a lot of what we call ice cream. This is what the cows want the most. And there's a type of native, it's called Pascapalian. It's kind of like a Bermuda, but it's a native, and it has long joints. So some people call it joint grass. We call it ice cream because it's very high in protein, and it'll last in the edges of those marshes all the way into late January sometimes. And even when it's dormant, it has a pretty good high protein. So that's why we're able to, and we feed tubs, and this was run an electric fence because even though I stockpile it, I still rotational graze it. They just get certain parts, and I move them so I can make it last until they at least have a baby. But we've moved them so much, and they've learned so much that when they start calving, I can actually ride out on the side-by-side by myself, and that cow will leave where she's at and head north to where that ryegrass pasture, because she knows I had that baby, now I get to go on the ryegrass. So she will not give me any, and last year I believe every Friday I put pairs on grass that were born for that week. And I think I only got horseback one time, and it was because the cow was nuts. But anyway, so I'm able to, and that kind of, when you think about it, they get programmed for that. It also helps them cycle. Their body learns that if I'm pregnant in January and I have that baby, I get to get on the good stuff. So I'm going to breed when I'm supposed to breed so that I can get on that ryegrass. And it really does. It's Mother Nature. Mother Nature takes care of it. So that's why we are able not to feed hay. But I do that ryegrass because it's an insurance. Those cows with those baby calves, they really don't need to be on there the first 30 days, but I get anxious and I let them on there. But 30 days with a baby on them, they don't go to hurt until after that point. So, but they get on there, the calves get big, and that's what we're after. We're after pounds. So that is, this is the north end of our place. This is the south end of our place. This is the east, and this is the west. So these are all individual pastures, and then I break these it's 13 pastures, 13 or 14 I believe it is. Then I'll take these pastures and break them up with polywire. I don't mess with the metal, I only use one strand, a little polywire with the fiberglass post, and that's how we break it up to do our rotational grazing. So what we also did 3 years ago is we put aside 40 acres and we started reintroducing prairie grass to our place. So this was this spring. That was the first year that the forbs showed up. We planted them 3 years ago, but we'd see one here, one there. This year, they were everywhere. I rode out there very early in the morning, and there was bees and bugs and just all kind of little things. I sat still, and it was there, and it was amazing how just that 40 acres of prairie grass has changed our whole 1,000 acres as far as bringing back the things that were missing, the birds, the bees, the butterflies, and so we're hoping to try to get it extended out. We're going to try to do some things like Mr. Abel does with feeding on the ground cubes and putting the seed out and let them trample the seed in, and try to get some little strips here and there going and spread it. We don't know yet what's going to happen when we get a hurricane and the salt water comes on it. So as far as spending a lot of money on it, you know, you always have to have that in the back of your mind. After Hurricane Ike and all that water left, we were 6 months. We had to leave that pasture. We had to find another place. But when we came back, there was not a weed on that place. It was nothing but lush grass, and so sometimes it's a good thing. So we planted big blue stem, little blue stem, a native Louisiana gamma, the regular gamma, switchgrass, and Indian grass. So some of it took off. This was the very first spring after we planted it. The picture on this picture, and this was the second year what it looked like. And then the picture I previously showed was what it looked like this spring. And that was a close-up shot of some of the forbs that were finally starting to come up, and that's it. So that's kind of what it looked like this early summer. And then I grazed it. I'm like, they kept telling us, oh, you can't graze it. I'm like, I'm grazing it. I'm gonna utilize it. It's just not gonna sit there 40 acres without anything on it. And now I have burned it once. Last year we didn't. We have a lot of fuel this year. We're going to burn it again, but I burned it not last year, but the year before. So I grazed it this summer, and that's about as far as they took it down. They really only just graze the tops of it, and they go on to other things. So I didn't have to worry about them grazing it too short. They say 8 inches is kind of I think the shortest you should graze it. I think this was 12 to 15 inches that they grazed it. And I put the entire herd in there, and I left them in there about a week. And my dad was like, get them out. And I'm like, it's okay, I already checked them, it looks good. So I finally got it out because he forced me to. But I left them longer. And so I really feel like it's helped it's helped it get more established. To me, it's just super slow, and I don't know if it's because we're on the Gulf Coast, but to me, it's just taken forever to get established. This spring will be the 4th year, so, but I just decided I was going to utilize it. We also have a lot of native clover, and we do have some established clover, and that usually appears in March, mid-March, and that's usually what the cows that are late calving or maybe were open and didn't breed back, and that's what they end up finishing up to get into a body condition score. We put bulls out April 1st, and we pull bulls July the 1st. Because of Hurricane Laura this year, we didn't lose any cattle. We had Hurricane Laura, 30 days later we had Hurricane Delta, and we had a tropical storm in between those two. So I kept thinking, I was worried to death about my cows. I didn't lose any cows, but I had 40 open cows. So what had happened, even to the point we palpated in December. They were sloughing embryos even at that time, and the storm was in August. So it wasn't so much that we lost any cattle from it, it's the stress of what they went through. The first thing they got rid of was what was taking the stuff away from them. And so I do have a little fall calf crop this year, but after a while I'll tell you why it's benefiting me. Another thing that we had to do after Ike and Rita is we had to figure out how to get fresh water, because everything is salt water after that point. And they can't drink out of a canal, they can't drink out of a ditch, there's nothing but a trough. And so on that 1,000 acres, we only had one freshwater trough, and it was way up at the north end. So through NRCS, we put in a solar system, and what this is a 6,000 gallon water tank. We have a 40-foot hole in the ground. It's got a submersible pump down in there. The 40 foot is where we hit groundwater. And it pumps, it fills that tank up, and then gravity feeds the troughs. We now have, and it's run on solar, strictly solar, no battery, it's just solar. We have 2 original troughs, and then we put in a 3rd trough. And then we want to put in an additional 4th trough, but we want to try to go a 1/4 mile. We're not sure if we have enough head pressure to push it, but we're going to run it on top of the ground this spring and just see if it works. And if it does, then we'll put it under the ground. We utilize, like I said, tons of electric fencing. I do all the electric fencing by myself. I have my side-by-side rigged up. I go out there. My husband has a full-time job. My daddy's 80 years old. I'm the only one. So I got to be able to do it. This was to keep my bulls on this side of the fence, and all my pairs were on this side of the fence, and that one strand kept 9 bulls all summer out of those cows. It's amazing once they learn about it. And so this is just how I go about putting it out. Everything's, and I did have my husband one day helping me, and he won't walk. So I drive, and he just sits there and puts the post in the ground. But so like I said before, all these pastures are cut even smaller. So this is where I plant my winter forage, this area here, and I will cut this pasture in half and this pasture in half, and I will cut these 2 in half, and I'll have bulls, and I'll rotate them. And even though it's just, it's winter forage, and you're thinking, well, just let them eat it. I have to let it last all winter, so I have to rotate them. And I don't let them eat it all. And then by the time they're ready to rotate back around where they started, it's all back up and it's good, and it lasts all winter. Carries me all the way into May most of the time. And this is moving, just a slide of moving cattle. And this is after we moved some cattle into it's what it looked like after they'd already grazed that pasture and they were moved somewhere else, and that's what it looked like when I put them back the second time on there. And this is along the marsh, them get to go back in the marsh. So we run Brayford and Brayford-based cows, not F1s, and Brangus cows. And this was from this spring, or this fall. And we run registered Angus bulls. And I really got into genetics on Angus bulls and EPDs, and I learned a lot. I taught myself a lot. Went to a lot of bull sales, looked at a lot of bull sale catalogs, and we try to buy bulls, nothing under $70 G on the grid. That's on the grid. And it has immensely changed our herd. This is some of our calves ready to ship. We formed an alliance where we're at. We have about 10 guys around our area that run the same type Angus bulls, have the same type cows, and so we pull the cattle together. We give them all the same shots. They're all in the Angus Link program. They're tagged. They have RFID tags and a dangle tag that matches. I market all these cattle, and it changes from year to year who we sell them to. And so we have a ranch right down the road that took the time and money to put in a big scale, and they allow us to ship from that facility. So we truck them. It's 10 miles from the furthest one. It's about 10 miles to the ranch. We weigh the cattle. Well, let me back up. So when the cattle are worked in the spring, everybody weighs them, and they're babies. They turn that weight to me, the sex, the weight, and the color, which are all black, but sometimes there'll be a off-colored one in there. And so depending on where it come from, I've done this for 16 years. We've done this. I know whose calves are going to gain what. So I put a weight on them, and I carry them out to where I think our ship date's going to be. I put that weight on them, and then I create the loads. So when they get to the ranch, and then each person is responsible for swapping a calf that maybe don't perform, or something that overperforms. But they're supposed to bring me whatever they said they were going to have in that load. So I put the loads together, and then they're weighed, and there's big steers, little steers, big heifers, little heifers, and then they're loaded on the trucks right there. So after being with the high Angus genetics for 6 years now, I found a group of guys in South Texas that wanted to buy our calves. So they bought them, and I asked them, could they give me the data? And they said yes. So not only did they give me the data, they let me visit them on the feed yard. So I went down. It was in South Texas. The ranch was in South Texas. The calves were backgrounded in South Texas. They were fed in South Texas. I went to the feed yard 3 times during the whole feeding process, visited with the feed yard operator, looked at the cattle, and this is a picture of them when it was getting towards the end before they were going to process them. They processed them at there's a big killing plant in Corpus Christi, Texas, and they gave me back the data. So this is what our first set of calves did that we ever fed and got information back on. They were 88% Choice Plus, and 61% of them were yield grades 1s and 2s. They never went north of Interstate 10. Never. So that right there told me, I'm on to something. So I told my dad, I said, why don't we feed some ourselves and sell them to the public? So now I am doing a farm-to-table type deal. It's Duhon's Deluxe Angus beef. And because I have been with the Angus Link program for so long, I had all the third-party verifications to get my label through the state and through the federal government, and I was able to have Angus in my title. It's on my label. It says Angus beef. That's what it is. That's what they are. And so that was super cool and a feather in our hat because no one else in the state has that. So that was so we created, and I've been doing this about 6 months. And so that's just a example of what the state label looks like. The federal label is a different little, it's, I think it's round. I can't remember, but it looks different. And so I have to process the cattle, you have to have a label at each processing facility that is approved for labeling. Okay, so I'm just diving into this little big river, I guess you could say, because it's something else. And so just to put my foot in the door, my brother suggested, why don't we do a couple cull cows and just do ground beef? And in the last 60 days, I've sold 1,100 pounds of ground beef. And each time I've gotten it from the processor, it's been in my possession 24 hours, and it's gone. And I have not advertised. I have not marketed. It's been strictly word of mouth. And I made them laugh. I said, I think I know what a drug dealer feels like, because my phone was dinging and people were driving up, and I had all this cash, and I was like, what the? It was crazy, but it's a good problem to have. So I'm looking forward. Because I wasn't sure, I only kept 7 steers, because I'm like, I don't want to get stuck with all these steers. So I kept 7 steers, and this is what the freezer looked like, and this is how it comes. And believe it or not, that little pack right there will thaw out in about 10 minutes if you submerge it in a little thing of water. And people, I mean, the women love it. That's the first thing I tell them. Now, if you just dump this in, I didn't know that. I had to eat a pack myself. And I do some things on Facebook. I took a picture of the first stuff I cooked, but I only kept 7 steers. And I've been giving them, they're on just some rank old pasture. And they have some mineral in front of them in a roughage tub, and I give them 1 50-pound sack of some 14% pellets a day. I'm waiting for that. When I get back, I think they'll be ready to go on the forage, the winter forage, with my bulls. I'm going to put them in there with my bulls, and then February 1st, I showed cattle, so I'm pretty sure I know how to feed them. Our problem is I don't have a very good feed source where we're at. We don't have a very good economical feed source. I'm going to do the 7, but the next group, I made a deal with that same feed yard that fed that set of cattle. He'll take 20 head. I got 20 babies on the ground. That's going to be the next set. They're going. And then hopefully by then, I'll about every 6 months, I'll be processing cattle. And hopefully I'll have them sold, but if they're not sold, they'll go to the plant in Corpus Christi, and I don't lose any money on that deal. So hopefully it'll be a double rainbow, and we won't get any storms, and everything will be hunky-dory, but we all know that's not going to happen. So anyway, so if you have any questions, or I pretty much wraps it up what I have to say.
Any questions for Anna?
Yeah.
This might be a dumb question. Why the burning instead of bush hogging? Like, those are the ones you're doing the cool season?
Okay, so we burn in the February, because all that marsh grass, if we get frost, it's dead. So you burn it, and what comes out is just like having ryegrass for them. you know, and it'll be greened up and at the end of March, and they just roll into it. The burning in the fall was strictly because it would have cost me. Here's the thing I forgot to tell y'all: we don't own a tractor, not one tractor. We do not own a tractor, but I do have a neighbor who does a little bit of contract stuff, and I hire him to do mowing. But that stockpile pasture, to really get the goods from that, in that month of June to mid-July, you do need to kind of clip it, because then by November that newness has come out, and that it's got a little bit better palatability and protein on it. So anyway.
And then probably some minerals released from the burning, you know,
Yeah.
just different kind of.
The decomposition's much quicker.
Right.
And you've got that north, you're doing the cover crop, the winter cool
Mm-hmm.
season, and then you're doing the stockpiling most of the other.
Right. But so I really need about 100 more cows to really make that place work right. I don't have enough cows. And so that's my biggest problem. And I need to start keeping these heifers out of this genetics. So those steers that I want to kill, they got to be able to cover the cost of that heifer. That's not going to put me any money in my pocket, because she's not going on that load. So in my mind, that's what I'm trying to work for. And I think I can get it done. I've already sold 3 of the 7 steers, and nobody balked on the price. So on a full steer, well, I'm giving them a ballpark figure, because I hear in about 6 months they're talking about fat cattle being $1.65. Now that would be awesome, but I don't want to put myself in that position where I've got them priced and I could maybe get a little more money for them. But at the same time, I want to build a customer base, and I don't want to scalp them, you know. But it's amazing. I'm finding that educating the public is going to be my biggest obstacle, because they don't understand how much freezer space they meet. They don't understand that how come this 1,200-pound steer, I only got 500 pounds of meat. The butcher kept some of it.
Yeah.
You know? And so you got to explain all that about yield and about carcass weight. And so far, the ones that I've explained it to, when I got through, they're like, well, put me down, I want a half a cat. You know, so it's
Yeah.
pretty interesting.
Okay.
So.
Any other questions? Quick for Anna?
Just real quick, the steers you kept back, were they from your oversized and undersized group, or were you pulling out of the heart of what you could ship?
I'll tell you what I did. I used the nasal modified live this year, and so I did a booster. So when I boosted, I re-weighed. I kept the 7 steers that gained in that time frame 2.2 to 2.5 pounds a day on their mama. So, but I don't know that on the next group, phenotypically, they might not be where I want them to be in the end, because they maybe have a little more ear on them than I want them to have. But the next group, I'm going to try to do both. I'm going to try to look at what they gained in that time period, and I don't know, I may have to start keeping some of the bottom end to be able to have enough cattle to last me through where they're coming on. I don't know if I can have a 6-month gap between each set of calves. I don't know if that's going to work, but it's all things that I gotta learn about.
Yeah.
So,
All right, join me in thanking Anna for her presentation today. Our next speaker is Laura Muntz from Salina, Kansas. So we're going back north, a little bit west.
I'll let you.
She is a marketing person. She has her own marketing business. And through the GLCI in Kansas, she has been starting to help them market the grazing things that they're doing. So with that, help me welcome Laura here today to our session.